Network Automation Nerds podcast.
Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and a lot of other technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, I am super excited to talk to Rowell Dionicio. Rowell is an experienced wireless network expert, the founder and managing director of Packet 6, and the host of Clear to Send podcast, amongst other things. Prior to founding his own company, Rowell held different roles in the IT field, including 8 years in higher education at Stanford University. And I'm going to pick his brain on that because I'm very interested in that. Today on the show, we'll be talking about his path to IT, networking, his passion for wireless, and how you can make your own wireless network better. I am super excited to have Rowell on the show, and I know we'll have a great time chatting. So let's dive right in. Hello, Rowell. How are you this morning?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Just one correction, 6 years
Yes.
at Stanford.
Oh, 6 years. Sorry, I couldn't do my math. And that's that college tuition down the drain. Yeah, you don't have to go to Stanford in order to do basic math. And I failed at that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
UW.
we all do it, and I know people get all hung up on subnetting, and that seems like basic math, but hey, I still use a subnet calculator. So
Oh, for sure, right? Like, I don't think I've ever, outside of slash 24 and 23, I think slash 22 is my maximum, right? Like, if it goes out to slash 21, and you start to have to go with a couple of slash 23s, one slash 24s, and subnetting, then yes, subnet calculator saves their day. Yeah. So before we get started, do you want to just kind of, because you have so many different hats, so I don't think I did justice to that. So do you want to just go over a little bit of all the projects you have going on and everything that you're working on?
yeah, sure. Wearing many hats can be like a double-edged sword. So I tend to do a lot of things just because I guess I like to keep myself busy, but the primary thing I do is I'm a technical team lead for the Wi-Fi team over at Stanford University. So we're always working on Wi-Fi across the campus, improving it. And then, when I'm not doing that, which is basically after hours, I have my own business consulting. There's two of us in that company, and I do have a handful of clients that I work with on occasion. It's not a lot because I still have a full-time job, but even when I'm not doing that, of course I blog and do podcasting. So it it's busy, and we were talking before we recorded. I was just saying how busy I was. And so sometimes I just have to calm down, relax, because in addition to all these things that I do, I have a family. So I have two kids, and we live in San Diego, so they themselves, like, I'm always there because I work from home.
Yeah, yeah. How does that work? You're doing a lot of consulting and for Stanford, but you're living in kind of on the other end of the state. So do you fly up there? Is travel
Yeah,
become?
yeah. Yeah, so I'm full-time at Stanford, and then I am on a on-call rotation, so I do go up there regularly for my
Oh my
on-call.
God.
So I'm in the area during on-call. So yeah, I travel up there.
Woo! I thought I was busy with like a full-time job and maybe going for some studying, but apparently you're much more of a go-getter.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day of how easy or much easier it would be for me if I had a job where I just showed up and left. Like and there was no on call,
Right.
no one needed to bother me. Like I showed up in the morning and I left, like, did a 4-hour shift or 8-hour shift and went home. Like, how
Sure.
much easier would that make things?
Yeah, just the mental drain, right? I totally know what you're talking about because back when I was doing regular on-calls and maintenance windows, even though the maintenance window, let's just say, is 3 a.m. in the morning and you're supposed to get some rest, but that is outside your normal cadence, right? So you can't really
Mhm.
get rest. And then you're always thinking about that maintenance. What if something goes wrong? Double
Yeah, yeah.
checking. It's really the mental game that's overlooked, I think.
Yeah, and that's it. it's a big thing in IT, right?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of us, we're a salaried position,
Hmm.
and that tends to come with a lot of work hours, right? Odd work hours, but then long work hours. So you could be hours on end on a support call
Yeah.
because of an issue, and that'll just ruin your body clock and your sleep. And even this morning, I'll tell you, this morning was hilarious. So I couldn't sleep, right? So I went
Hmm.
to bed maybe around 11:30 or midnight, and then I got a call at 3 in the morning saying network was down in
Mm.
on the East Coast.
Oh
So
my God.
this is one of my clients that I have. So I'm like,
Sure.
all right, I'm up. I'm
I
not
hope it's not
doing.
like financial trading because like 3 a.m. That's when
No, it's
the
not.
market opens. Okay.
It's a warehouse.
Okay.
So I did their network, and they called me at 3 saying, yeah, the network's down, and they think it's this, that. And
Sure.
so at that time, I'm not working for Stanford because it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and
Sure.
I don't really start my day at Stanford until 8 or 9. And so I spent from 3 to 5 just troubleshooting. And even thinking about this recording that we're doing, I was like, man, am I gonna make it for this recording?
Well, I'm glad you did, but
Yeah,
that
it worked
is
out.
intense.
Yeah, so I've been awake since 3.
Oh my God. Okay. Sorry. I didn't mean to put that much, additional stress on you, but I couldn't predict
No, there's
the
no
call.
additional stress. It's just that once I was done, I was like, should I go back to bed and then wake up at 6:45 or something?
Yeah. I appreciate it. I really appreciate that. I understand how stressful that could be. And I appreciate you, being very considerate about, 6:45. That's a bit of a time before our actual recording day time, right? So you're actually buffering in. So speaking like a true entrepreneur, ready for unpredictable things.
Yeah, I think that's just what I'm used to, is dealing with issues that arise on the spot, whether it's technical or something you do day to day. Like maybe it's with the house or with your kids. Like I've just gotten used to it, but I think it's because of how my career has been.
Yeah, speaking of your career, you wear so many hats, and I'm wondering, how did you get into technology? How did you get your start?
Yeah, it started in like senior year of high school. I already knew that I wanted to be in IT. So I didn't go the traditional college route. I didn't apply for any universities. I wanted to do something that went straight into tech, but
Hmm.
didn't require me to do a lot of studying of other fields to get there.
Hmm.
So I went to ITT Tech. So they're
Oh,
no
okay.
longer around.
Yeah.
So I spent like 4 years there, and 2 years in, I think I got a help desk position,
Hmm.
and then made my way up to sysadmin. Uh, then eventually became an IT manager for a short while, and then became a network engineer. So
Oh,
I have
wow.
always wanted to be in networking. That was kind of the path I wanted to take. But I've kind of done everything up to network engineering, and then now I focus on Wi-Fi.
That is super interesting. I want to say you're maybe one of the few guests that knew he wanted to do networking, and it was so focused that you actually wanted nothing, like you said, right? You don't want to study English and math just to get to networking, so
Yeah,
you went straight to
I
ITT.
yeah, but when I went to ITT, I still had to do all that. I think I failed the math class once, and then I took some English classes, and I just wanted to avoid things like physics
Yeah.
and biology because I knew I wasn't. I didn't want to do it, but you know, after after getting past through education, I learned that if you did learn that stuff, it would be useful just
Mhm.
on your normal day to day stuff.
Right. But nobody needs calculus, I'll tell you that. On a day-to-day, grocery shopping,
If you
budgeting.
looked at the algorithms they use in Wi-Fi, maybe you would change your mind.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Yeah, not on a day to day, but in very specialized fields or
Hmm.
certain categories, you definitely need these algorithms, and if you want to go deep in that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you mentioned you eventually became you went to networking. So how was that transition career pathwise between networking to wireless? How did it lead to that and made you want to specialize in wireless?
Yeah. So I feel like I have to step back because I
Okay.
think the hardest thing to do is transition to network engineering.
Okay.
And then going from network engineering to Wi-Fi wasn't as difficult for me. It was more of a I fell into it kind of thing. But before I really wanted to become a network engineer, and to get there, it was rather hard to get to that role
Hmm.
because at the time, I think this was maybe 7 years ago, um, people weren't hiring network engineers if they were not touching networks, basically, right? So you're
Hmm.
always in this catch 22, and I know a lot of people
Hmm.
fall into that role
Yep.
where they're help desk and they want to be a network engineer. But trust me, like if you go through that through from the bottom and move through all these positions, you become a better network engineer.
Hmm.
So I was lucky that I had managers that, or a manager that was willing to give me uh, that's a chance to work on network engineering stuff. And
Right.
so I got hired on to take, I don't even know how I nailed this role, but because I was more of a sysadmin at the time.
Yeah.
And then I had already touched like a couple Cisco stuff, like the old 4500
Hmm.
chassis. And
Hmm.
then he was like, "All right, well, I think you can handle, this kind of distributed network of 1U switches." And back in the day, it was like the 3650 or 3750 switches.
Yep.
So from there, just kind of once I touched that, I was like, okay, I want to do more network engineering stuff, but it was still kind of a side thing. Like I had to do that plus
The
manage,
sysadmin.
yeah, firewalls,
Yeah.
servers, like everything. But I always just wanted to do network engineering. And so eventually they transitioned me to a network only role. So instead of being at one client managing their stuff, this was at an MSP.
Hmm.
Um, they said, you know what, we'll put you in a specialized role and then you can go to each of the other clients because most of the people there were just generalists. And then at that point, I ended up at Stanford, and when I was at Stanford, I already had some Wi-Fi experience because I was doing Wi-Fi for the MSP, and it
Yeah.
only escalated from there. So there were processes that weren't in place for doing a proper Wi-Fi design. We weren't optimized with configuration, so I kind of picked all of that up and learned it. Took what I learned from the MSP, and then kind of made myself, or I positioned myself as, hey, let me be the wireless SME.
Yeah. Did you go through any, like you said, a lot of people got caught in the catch 22, right? They want experience, but you can't get experience until you start touching the routers and switches. Did
Mhm.
you go through any certifications, or did you go the Cisco route, or was Cisco
Yeah.
even big in wireless back then?
Um, so specifically in wireless,
No, just networking in general. I think you
yeah,
said that transition from networking to wireless was easier than just breaking into networking, right?
yeah, yeah. So I picked up a network plus first,
Hmm.
and that just kind of helped with some foundations. And then I actually didn't get into switching until I went into this nonprofit and they had a lot of Dell switches.
Hmm.
So my experience started with Dell switching, and
Hmm.
then we migrated to Cisco. And at that point, that's when I picked up a CCNA, and my CCNA actually expires in next month. Um,
Uh-oh.
I don't plan on renewing it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
because I don't have the time, and I feel like I already do more than CCNA.
Oh, for
but
sure, right?
but the
You
CCNA
have my
helped
approval.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, CCNA helped me understand more of that, and I kind of stopped. actually, no, that's not true. I didn't go CCNP or CCIE. I just stuck with CCNA. But I do have books for like CCNP and CCIE stuff. I just read through them. I just decide not to take the test.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounded like you've been very practical, right? Like not this background, but on your website and some of the backgrounds that you show, there's just the bookshelves of Cisco Press books because you could tell because they're just very distinct on the
Yeah.
dark
Yeah,
green.
yeah. And those are the physical copies.
Yeah, yeah, back then, right? Like you and I, we
I
like
have a lot
physical
of the
copies.
PDFs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it doesn't mean you didn't obtain the knowledge. It just meant you were very practical about and pragmatic about what kind of books and knowledge that you obtain.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and certifications are there. There's different phases of that we go through with certifications. For those who are trying to get into a role, certifications are more of like a resume building
right,
type of thing.
right.
And then as you gain more experience, certifications become closer to a either a requirement for wherever you work
Hmm.
or personal achievement that you want to do, or I just need to learn something. I just need to learn and because I'm dealing with this technology, so I'll go through the certification route as a structured learning process, right?
Yeah,
Because a lot of this information is just available on like Cisco's website,
absolutely.
Juniper's website. It's all there. It's just you have to find it, right?
Right.
So, like so I did take DevNet Associate, and the way I took that is I didn't have a book. I think at the time when DevNet was released, there was no book
Yeah.
for
It came
DevNet.
6 months after, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have it now, but I got it after I passed the certification, and I just wanted to have a copy for reference. But I went online through Cisco's website, searching for everything that had to do with the objective that they
Yeah.
listed, and then uh, putting into practice for that.
Yeah, that's a really good advice, I think, for people who were just thinking about getting into the field. I think, like you said, it's a structured way. So you don't really know what you don't know, and you have to start somewhere. So you might
Mhm,
as well start on this path that's promised and curated for people. And I saw a lot of that on the DevNet, developer page as well. They have these learning paths. So if
mhm,
you're interested in sysadmin, you go a certain path. To me, that's the best part about the website. It's just a lab plus a
mhm.
curated path if you're interested in just wireless, for example.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And with Wi-Fi, there um, in our field, we're fortunate that there are a lot of people who do write about Wi-Fi, and so if there was something you wanted to look up or learn, you'll probably come across somebody's blog who has written about it. Now, even when it comes to blog articles and even my own, like you don't want to take that content as like the truth, you know?
Hmm.
You should
Hmm.
somewhat validate that information. Even the stuff I put out, I always tell people like that's from my point of view. I could be wrong.
Hmm.
Um, I would just hope someone would tell me I'm wrong if I wrote it. But
In a nice way, right? Because
yeah, in a
everybody's
nice
nice on the internet.
constructive way. Yeah.
Yeah. Not just like you suck, but tell us why. I mean, I'm the same way. It's like, yeah, I know I suck, but tell me why and how I could improve, and we'll all, become better that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I do because I actually put myself out there quite a
Yep.
bit, right? With
Yep.
writing, posting things. Because I always question, like, should I post this? Maybe not. Um, I have openly just agreed with myself. I'm okay with looking like a failure. Like if I failed, like sure, I'll just learn from that. And it's no
Right.
big deal. Like I put
How
something
did
out
you
there, I got corrected. So it's okay.
how did you get to that point? Myself included. I mean, I put myself out there with the writings and podcasting such as this one, but the imposter syndrome is very real, right? How did
Mhm,
you get to a point where you're okay and not be impacted? I won't say not impacted too much, right? It's definitely this
mhm.
impact on maybe not succeeding in the first time.
A lot of it is actually doing it, right? Getting to do it the first time.
Okay.
Um, and so you have to be able to come to terms with yourself and say, you know what, if I put this out there, I will accept criticism, feedback, good or bad. Like if you're okay with that and you
Yeah.
could take it, then do it. Like if you can't handle that very well, then maybe it's not quite for you. Maybe you just write that internally for your own, right? Like your own internal journal or notes wherever you want to write to.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to write in a public forum. So there's been one time where I always remember this. I was still learning about Wi-Fi and I wrote something and someone actually they replied to my tweet saying I was wrong.
Hmm.
And this person, like, I highly looked up to, so I knew he knows his stuff more than I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead of saying or like hiding in my shell,
Hmm.
I just opted to say, well, tell me more. Like,
Yeah.
why is it wrong? And so what I ended up doing is instead of just modifying my blog post and deleting the wrong stuff, I actually just like I did the strike through and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
wrote the right response and said why it was right and who corrected me. And so as long as you can get to that point, then uh, it doesn't matter, because in the grand scheme of things, making a mistake, like those kinds of mistakes,
Yeah.
is not like a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a resume generating event. Um, but you do. I still go through that where I'm gonna post something and I look at it, go like, should I post this? Like, what if somebody thinks this and that?
Yeah.
And then at some point, I just kind of like sit there and I go, who cares? And then I
Yeah.
just
You press the publish button and then you run
yeah.
away.
And then you know what happens is after you publish it, no one says anything,
Yeah.
because the majority of the time, no one is going to say anything. If anything, you might get positive feedback, but
Right.
you just have to have the expectation that there will be feedback. Somebody will say something.
Yeah. What I picked up on that, conversation we just had was you really have a growth mindset. You believe things could be better, right? Like whatever you publish is not final. You could still do the strike through. So it's not the end of the world when somebody uh, did have an input or corrected, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is a good advice. And also, I think besides the growth mindset, that it's really so for me, I actually look for the small wins. And whenever I feel down or I feel discouraged, I look at the little bit of things that if it helped one person or if
Mhm.
somebody, just a milestone. And sometimes, like, I'm not courageous like you, I don't put everything out there, but I do keep a journal on the small wins just
Mhm.
as a way to like pick myself up when I'm down.
That is absolutely something everyone should do. I do that as well. I document my wins. I have something where I have it called accomplishments, and I'll just list it. And a lot of times, I'll ask people. So our podcast has a Slack,
Hmm.
and a lot of times, I try to do it once a week. I ask people to post their wins.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be professional. It could also be a personal win, because I always say celebrate small wins, because a lot of times we don't, right? It's just
Yeah.
we just feel like we're in this grind, and if you're not stepping back and going, here's what I've done, even in the last 7 days or the last month, like, you have to give kudos to yourself,
Yeah.
and even other people. I would say, um, don't only celebrate your wins, but celebrate other people's small wins.
Yeah. I celebrate your wins, my friend. We'll go into a little bit later, but the build in public and consulting and podcasting, those are huge wins. But we'll go into that a little bit later. Um, what I also wanted to say was, you know, that well, anyways, tell us a little bit about I'm gonna switch gear a little bit because I think I want to get to the packet six, the consulting and the podcasting, as you mentioned before. So how did you get started? I mean, it sounded like you were in a traditional role. You were not doing projects outside of full-time position, or have you always done some sort of side projects, which led to the podcasting and the
Yeah,
consulting?
I've always had a side job. So
Mm,
even when I was working at the MSP that I worked
yeah,
at,
yeah.
I had a side job, and I was a wedding photographer. So I've
Oh, wow, that's very different.
yeah. So I stopped doing wedding photography when I started doing on-call stuff because I didn't want to book a wedding and then I'm like on call at the same time. Who would ever do
Right.
that? Um, so eventually, like I ended that, but I would do in IT while in IT when I wasn't on call, I was doing photography.
Hmm.
So I've always had a side gig. So I always think about what I just have this entrepreneurial mindset, right? So
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about what can I do to create some income, even if it's a small thing. Like right now, um, I collect sports cards and Pokemon cards,
Oh,
and
no kidding. Okay.
I'm about to like try to sell some of them, and I have like I literally have like this stack right here are all cards. I
Hmm.
just haven't organized them, and even
Okay.
behind me, I have a stack of cards like all right there in the back.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So for people who are listening to the podcast, I mean, we also have a YouTube video. If you want to look at the spread on the side desk and the back desk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
baseball cards. Pokemon's the one I do the most, and I'm just getting started in Star Wars
Hmm.
cards. And I learned that Star Wars cards apparently have a tremendous value if you can pull the rare ones. And just yesterday, I learned that somebody got a Darth Vader card at this marketplace,
Yeah.
and it was just like a really rare card. It was like one of one. They only made one of those, and it was they probably bought it the pack for it was like a box probably for like $100 or so.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one card sold for $24,000.
Oh my God. That's
So like that's kind of the thing I'm into right now. So if you don't hear me like chatting on Twitter or anything, it's probably because I'm doing that.
Oh no, no. If we see you stop doing consulting all like by everything, then we'll no. Okay, we'll go check the collectors, auction sites
I'm
or
just getting
whatnot.
started, so I'm
Yeah.
like a total noob at that. I feel like how I started early in my career, like I don't know anything. I'm just doing whatever to get in, um, but basically, yeah, that's I always do something on the side.
Yeah.
That's long
Gary
story
V would
short.
be very proud. Like go into the garage sale, flip, baseball or Star Wars car, like you said. So how did that lead into? I mean, I understand that entrepreneurial spirit and trying to make be its own P&Ls and having a profitable side gig. But how did that lead into Packet Six and podcast or Clear to Send podcast?
Yeah. Um, so the Clear to Send podcast has been around longer than Packet Six. Packet Six started as a blog,
Okay.
and then when at the same time I was going to where I'm at now, I decided to turn it more into a consulting business,
Okay.
and so it it started very very small where the blogging kind of led to some people asking, "Hey, do you actually do some of this? On like, could you help us?" And that's just kind of like snowballed from there. And one of the things that I learned early on is if you wrote things the way Google can pick it up and the way people can search for it,
Yeah.
basically writing in a way for people to search for it, right? You write for whoever your audience is.
Yeah.
Um, it would pick up certain people, and then I had a contact form and people would start filling out the contact form. Then eventually I had like a website actually built out.
Yeah.
And so slowly I started getting clients, and then where it really took off is just really networking with people, not network engineering, but like speaking with
Sure.
people and
What people
uh,
normally say
yeah,
networking means.
yeah, the in-person
Yeah,
networking.
the normal people way.
And that's what kind of led to referral. So a lot of my work is referral based, or people who come in through the website.
Yeah, that's interesting because we talked about small wins, right? So that was like a small win where you start publishing and the publishing led to some inquiries, and the
Mhm.
inquiries led to the next. But you have the audacity to formalize that, because I do, get reached out by people, inquires about like consultings and so on, but I never pursued that. So kudos to you for take the initiative and just run with it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just have to do that, I think.
Mhm.
So and you mentioned about the Clear to Send podcast has been
Mhm.
around longer than the consulting business. How did that get started? Was it just another initiative that you took on and say, where's this podcasting thing going? I mean, when you started, it must have been not so easy, right? Because there's
Yeah.
no like all-in-one platforms. You have to, upload it somewhere. You have to
Mhm.
maybe construct your XML feed, and so on. So how did that get started?
Yeah, so it started when I was at the MSP that I worked at, and while I was there learning about Wi-Fi, I was listening to 2 different podcasts. Eventually,
Mhm.
I listened to all of their episodes, and they had stopped recording new ones.
Oh, no.
And, while I started learning, I was like, "Well, why don't I just kinda pick up where they left off or just start a new one?" And so that's how I started the podcast. Was I will just create episodes based on what I learn. So it was like
Mhm.
just another form of blogging. And so instead of writing about it, I just talked about it. And for the first few episodes, it was just actually for a couple of those episodes, it was just me talking to my wall in the garage. Um, and then I got some people to interview, and they joined on, and just kind of kept growing from there. Because it's like blogging. People wanted to hear about Wi-Fi, so it's a very niche area, and it's not like anything I try to grow crazy. It's more like a hobby, right? Like I we don't have these schedule commitments, and trying to publish consistently. Although that's good to publish consistently, but it's not. We didn't make it so that the podcast was a burden.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the key. If something becomes your full-time job, there's always these, again, like these mental things that you come and say, this is something that I have to do versus something
Mhm.
that I want to do for fun, for interest, decompress or whatnot. Um, I go through the same thing when I was creating courses. It's almost like I'm just talking to the void, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes a trick that a friend of mine told me was, if you stare at that red dot or ring dot, whatever it is on the camera, you're just like, it's like the Tom Hanks movie, right? You're like just talking to that dot, pretend
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you get hypnotized, or like that's your friend all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds pretty pathetic, but but hey, here we are, right? All right, cool. So in this part one of the episode, we talked about your background, put things into context, some of the projects that we've done. In part two of our interview, we're gonna go over more on the wireless part, maybe some of the build in public, and go more in depth into just build on what we've talked about. So thanks for being here on part one, and I hope to continue the conversation in part two, Raul.
Thanks.
Do you know where? Well, before we depart, though, where can people find you on social, or where do you want to connect people at? And of course, we'll have these in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so everyone can usually find me on Twitter at Rowell Dionicio, and then if you just search my name, you'll find my LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram's kind of where I stay on the personal side. So if you
Yeah.
just want to see like whatever the heck I'm doing,
Nice looking blinking lights, and
yeah,
wireless is working. You can't really see it, but
yeah,
hey, the blinking lights are nice to
yeah.
look
I
at
don't
too.
actually don't post a lot of wireless and tech on my Instagram, but on
Okay.
Twitter I do.
Okay, cool. So you heard that on Twitter, more on the professional. If you just want to get to know Royal as a person, Instagram, and tell your story with pictures. And I think
Yeah.
that's the theme, right?
Yep.
So thanks for listening to the Network Automation Nerds podcast today. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms. Until next time, bye bye.